Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 214. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks to a family doing a record-breaking trip from FamilyOnBikes.com.
One more cathedral, got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. For those of you who haven't been paying attention to the news, the obvious travel news story that we need to talk about today is the attempted hijacking on Christmas Day of an airliner by a man who had hidden a bomb in his underwear, which is a completely different type of dedication. And that attempt was foiled by the prompt reaction of his fellow passengers and not by any security means. And that has led to quite a bit of controversy about the TSA in terms of whether they were doing their job. And that has only been made worse when they had published the new guidelines for what you should do, but they hadn't published it to the public. They have a blog, but they hadn't used it. And so two travel bloggers, Flying with Fish and Chris Elliott, who has been a co-host on This Week in Travel with me, had got a copy of the memo and had published it so that people knew what they should expect the next day when they went to the airport. And much to, I think, everyone's surprise, they ended up being subpoenaed for that information. Flying with Fish had his computer seized. Chris Elliott had gotten a lawyer and had fought that particular summons until the TSA did finally back down. And that has just really only added fuel to the fire for the TSA because it's been a PR nightmare for them. But if you're interested in more information about that story, we talked about it all last week at This Week in Travel. So check out This Week in Travel, show number 20. Before we get started with this interview, I do want to apologize. The sound quality for this interview is not as good as I like, but it was as good as we were able to do with the internal microphone in the laptop that the family I'm interviewing had, and they're not likely to finish this trip for another year, as you'll hear. So if I wanted to get this interview, this was going to have to be what it was. I'd like to welcome the show Nancy Sathre-Vogel, who is coming to us from Family on Bikes. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Now, I say you're coming to us from Family on Bikes, that is familyonbikes.org, but there's a little longer story there. You and your family are on a bike trip, to put it simply and understatedly. Where are you now?
We are right now, we're in Quito, Ecuador right now.
Okay. And you started where and you're finishing where?
We started our trip 18 months ago up on the shores of the Arctic Ocean in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. We'll just keep going south until we get down to the southern tip of South America.
And we said your family, and your family is your husband and your two boys. And when you finish the bike ride, my understanding is the boys will be in the Guinness Book of World Record for being the youngest boys ever to complete that trek.
That's right. Yeah, they are trying to break the world record, and they're determined. They're determined little guys.
And how old are they?
They actually are celebrating their 12th birthday in about 12 days. 12 days now.
Okay. So now we've got people who are listening to the show wondering why anyone would ever do this. And we got people who wonder how they can do this. We're going to have a combination of things. Why did you end up doing this trip? I know this isn't your first bike trip, first of all.
Oh, gosh, I wish I knew. Honestly, and truly, I wish I knew. John and I used to do a lot of touring before the kids were born. That was how we met. We'd done a lot of bicycle touring, and it was kind of always a dream in the back of our mind that we would take off with our kids. But we always thought that it would never happen. One of those dreams that you have, a pie in the sky type dream that you'll never actually do. And I still don't know exactly what happened, but at some point in 2006, my husband came home from work and said, "This is crazy. I want to take off. I want to go out biking with the kids." 2 months later, we did. We had quit our jobs. We bought a bicycle boat for $3 at the time. The kids were 8 at that point. And so we set out, cycled around the U.S. and Mexico for a year. And on that trip, decided that we wanted to do this Alaska to Argentina trip. And then a year after we finished the other one, we took off on this one. It's really hard for me to say why, because, of course, there's a million different reasons. But what it comes down to, I think, the main thing is time. We want time. We've only got X number of years on this planet. We've only got X number of years with our boys. And they're kids right now. They love this traveling. They love being with mom and dad. We love being with them. And if we wait, of course, they're going to be grown and be on their own and have their own lives. And they're not going to want to take off and go out cycling with mom and dad. Right now they do, and so in order to take advantage of that time with them, now, here we are.
And what moment really stands out as, I am so glad we did this? We just would never have had this moment if we hadn't done this.
You know, I think one of the best things about a trip like this is that it really brings the family together, and we're working toward a common goal. I really realized that one day. We were entering into Guatemala, and we had this 23-kilometer section of dirt road. It was a really, really rough dirt road, dustier than anything. Every time a truck went by, sent up these huge, massive clouds of dust. So we're riding through this, and it was miserable. It really was miserable. But it's a short-term thing. You just push on, and you get there. And the last couple of kilometers of this dirt road to get up to the paved road was this really, really, really steep hill. And as we were pushing up, we were pushing our bikes to get up. It was a challenge, and it was a really steep road. It was a dirt road, bad dirt road. And we ended up having to shuffle around, and Davey went over and helped John with the tandem, and Daryl and I were playing leapfrog with the 2 single bikes. And it was interesting to watch how each one of us came in with our own strengths. We brought everything we had to the picture. We knew we had to get these 3 bikes up this hill, and everybody pitched in with every ounce of strength that they had, and every strength that we have, we came in there. And it was neat to see how a family just kind of pulled together to work toward that common goal. And I think that's the thing. Every once in a while, something will happen where I realize that, you know what, we are here together. We're battling this wind or whatever it is, and we're so focused together as a family on that common goal, which is something that you just don't get in American families these days.
And on the other side, when is the moment that you most thought, okay, that's it, we're going home?
Oh, the good thing on that one is that it doesn't hit us all at the same time. It might be that one day I'm really low, but the rest of the family is good to go. So fortunately, it hasn't happened that we've all been low at the same time. If that ever happened, I think we would turn around and go home. For me, I think the hardest part was going through Central America, through Costa Rica and Panama specifically. We were going through just the jungle. It was hot. It was humid. The scenery was same old, same old, same old trees, mile after mile after mile of green trees with lots of humidity in the air. It was boring. It was hot. It wasn't particularly exciting at all. That was probably the toughest part for me, where I was thinking, geez, do I really, really, really want to cycle through another 1,000 miles of this? But we just kind of kept going. I guess when you're in a family situation like this, the rest of them didn't voice that they wanted to go. Maybe they were thinking the same thing I was, I don't know. But we just kind of kept going, and eventually we got to the Andes, and that all settled down, and the excitement came back into it.
I heard you interviewed on Friedel and Andrew's show, the Grants, who do a show on cycling. Friedel's actually been on the Amateur Traveler twice. And you mentioned that you could go home tomorrow, but the boys are just so driven in getting the record, getting in the record book. Is that still the case?
It is. It is. The boys are so determined. To them, there is just no reason to give up at this point. We've come more than halfway. There's absolutely no reason right now for them to give up. And for John and I either, there's really no reason. I could stop right now and say, I've had a fabulous trip. I've learned a lot. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. It's been 18 months intense with my family. It's been a fabulous experience. I could call it off right now and have no regrets. The boys, however, would very definitely have regrets. At this point, we are in the Andes. It's tough. It's a physical challenge. And they're young and they're strong and they are getting stronger by the day.
Sure.
On the other hand, John and I are old fogies at this point, and so our bodies are in that decline mode. It's harder for me and John than it is for the boys. And our hope and prayer at this point is that we're strong enough to get the boys down to Ushuaia.
And Ushuaia is the end of the trek?
Ushuaia is the end of the road.
The end of the road, okay.
We may decide at that point that we want to go out to the actual tip of South America, which is, I don't even know how much farther it is, but apparently there's a little path that goes out there, and we can decide once we get to Ushuaia if we want to do that or not. But for the record, the end of the road is in Ushuaia.
And we should say you're cycling the Pan American Highway. Now, the Pan American Highway doesn't connect, is my understanding, in Panama, or did that change? Isn't there still the Darien Gap?
There is still the Darien Gap, and according to the Guinness regulations, we could either fly or take a boat across that. They gave us 2 cities in Panama and 2 cities in Colombia, and we had to connect between those with either flight or boat.
Okay. Who did you meet along the way who has been the most memorable person?
Oh, I'm not sure that there's one particular person, but it was kind of an interesting situation. When we were up in Alaska and northern Canada, we met a number of people just on the side of the road, started talking with these people that were up traveling in an RV or in cars or wherever. We meet people all the time. And then months later, we were at Canyon de Chelly in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting there trying to decide where we're going to go in Canyon de Chelly and talking to people. And these people come in and they said, well, we met you up in Alaska. And I was like, excuse me, say what? And they said, yeah, we were up. It was a rainy day, and you guys were taking shelter at this little convenience store, and we talked with you for like an hour. And I was just like, I mean, this is too small of a world, right? And that was up in Alaska. Now we meet them again in Arizona. Well, so then we continue on, and we get over. We were in Texas. We're riding along the road. And this RV pulls up and stops and says, hey, we met you guys up in Canada at Liard Hot Springs. And it was just like, this is too bizarre, right? This is too weird. So then we ended up getting down to McAllen, Texas, and we had been invited to a pro hockey game, and we were up in the booth up in the top of the thing. Mm-hmm. And so they showed us on the big screen at this hockey game. And next thing I know, this woman comes up, knocking on the door to this booth and says, we met you. Just such a small world.
That's
that
funny.
There were 3 different people that we had met up in Alaska and northern Canada who we met again down in the southern part of the U.S. So I think those were very memorable things, that it was just kind of this small world that made me realize how small our world really is.
Okay. Now, The boys are obviously still doing studies as they're going along, and you're both teachers? Do I have that correct?
We are both teachers. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they've got school with them. They can't get away from it. What are they learning, besides learning about themselves and what they can do, what are they learning that they would never have learned in a classroom?
I think that they're learning is they're internalizing some of this stuff in terms of geographic patterns and stuff. At one point, I remember, this was just a couple of weeks ago, we were arriving at the equator. And of course, in the books in the classroom, you learn that on the equator, the sun is intense and it's hot and all that stuff. So we were up in the Andes, we were up high, and we took off that morning, and it was cold. We were pulling out our long-sleeve shirts and bundling up as we took off. And as we're riding toward the equator, Davy said, we could actually see our breath that morning. And so we're riding along, and Davy said, we're arriving at the equator. I shouldn't be able to see my breath. I think that's the kind of stuff that they're learning. They're seeing it firsthand. They're riding over these passes. They understand what mountains are. They understand the forces of these tectonic plates as they collide, and they make these enormous mountain ranges. And they understand the effects of altitude and of further north. And when we were up there, it was 24 hours of daylight up in the tundra. They're seeing all of those patterns, and they're seeing them firsthand and truly understanding them rather than it being just something they've read in a book.
What's been the biggest surprise?
I think the biggest surprise has been just watching the boys and watching them rise to whatever challenge is placed in front of them. They never complain. They just do it. And seeing that makes me realize that, especially in the U.S., we underestimate our children so much. You know, we think that 11-year-old boys, all they're good for is to sit in front of the TV and play video games. And don't get me wrong, Davy and Daryl love sitting in front of a TV, and they love playing their video games. But they also realize that there's a whole other world out there, and the fact that they can ride this, and they're perfectly capable of doing it. I honestly, before we left, I wasn't sure if they were capable.
Interesting. Now, you did some preparation. I'm guessing you didn't just hit the road without doing some investigation. What do you wish you'd known, though, that you didn't learn as you're doing your preparation? Even though you did research, what did you not find out until you actually got on the road?
I can't think of anything really that has really taken me by surprise. On this trip, on our last trip, the first trip that we took with the boys, I remember at the beginning of that trip, I used to get really, really nervous as night was approaching and we didn't have a place to camp. I was really panicking. You know, here I am out at night, I've got these boys, and this is ridiculous, and what am I doing, and all the self-doubts. And yet, night after night after night after night after night, we always found a place to sleep, whether it was somebody let us camp in their yard or we happened to just miraculously find this beautiful meadow out in the middle of nowhere or whatever. Eventually, I settled down with that, and I knew that we would always find a place. No matter where we were or what we were doing, we would always be able to find a place to sleep. And I think that comes back to the fact that no matter where you are in the world, we as human beings have three basic needs. We need food, we need water, and we need a place to sleep. And everybody in the world understands that. We're a family, I suppose we kind of draw more pity, but I think it's even if you're not a family, you get the same thing. Everybody realizes that you need a place to sleep. So if it is getting late and you don't have a place, something will turn up because everybody understands that you need it.
Excellent. As you eventually finish this road trip, and you've got, what, a year ahead?
About a year more,
Because you have to finish in a certain time of year. You can't finish in winter in South America, so you basically have to take 12 more months to get down there.
Exactly. We have a friend who arrived down in Ushuaia in August, and he told us stories about pushing his bike through 2 feet of snow. That is not something we want to do. We are going to time it so that we're arriving down there in the summer. So we'll plan on arriving January or February of 2011.
Okay. When you finish, so far, what picture that you have from your trip is the one that you think is going to best summarize it for you? That's the picture that you're going to look at when you want to remember this trip.
You know, it's funny because I keep coming back to We stopped some people on the side of the road up in the Arctic tundra. It was like the third day of our trip or something, and had them take a picture of the four of us. And we were riding. You could see the tundra, just the flat tundra, no trees, just the Arctic grasses. There was a lake in the background that still had ice on it. And then there's the four of us in front of that lake. And I keep coming back to that picture. I would say it's rare that 2 weeks go by that I don't go and look at that picture. And I'm not sure what it is about it, but maybe it just is the whole excitement of our trip. And I was kind of waving at the camera. And I think in my mind, that could very well be it. I don't know. That could change as we get down the Andes, and my whole picture of this trip changes.
Some practical questions. If someone's planning a trip like this, what resource would you recommend for them?
The best resources really is just to get on the bike and go. You can read about it, and you can read about it, and you can read about it, but the reality is until you get out there on the road, you just won't know. My very first trip, my first bicycle tour, I took off, went to a dam 100 miles away from home. I had a bicycle. That was about all I had. I had a sleeping bag. I had no rack on my bike, so I went down and I bought a cheap old rack. I just tied a bunch of plastic bags with gear on my bike, and I took off. And, I made a lot of mistakes. That whole tour was like a comedy of errors rather than a tour. But I learned so much on that trip, and I learned, it was only 4 days. It was 200 miles. But I learned so much, and then from there, I was able to say, okay, this is essential, and that is essential. By the time I did another trip, I pretty much knew what I had to have. Bicycle touring is so easy, and I think that's the thing. Everybody, I read all this stuff about people researching bikes, and what kind of bike do I need, and what kind of gear do I need, and how do I plan a route, and I'm saying, holy cow, you don't need to do all that stuff. You just get on your bike and you ride. You learn fast, and especially if you're taking off in the U.S., you're not going to be very far from a bike store. If you do realize that you really need something, you don't have very far to go to get it, and you're fine. So really, you can do all the research you want. You really just need to get on the bike and go.
You saved up for this trip, and you've also had some very generous sponsors who've helped with it. But what's your best money-saving tip?
Oh, best money-saving tip. I think just touring by bicycle. I think touring by bike is a cheap way of traveling. We have no gas expenses. We spend most of our time out in little tiny villages, and the little tiny villages are cheap. And so traveling this way, we don't really work on conserving money or saving money. We do to an extent, of course, and we don't go to really fancy hotels. We pull into Quito or wherever, and we do look for cheaper hotels. But generally speaking, traveling by bicycle, you just don't spend a lot of money. We eat as much food as we want to eat. I buy whatever food I want. I don't look at, okay, how can I eat cheaper or whatever. We need to eat good food, and we need to eat a lot of food, and we do. And we stay in hotels, but again, in these small towns, the only hotels there are cheap hotels. So it's not really a matter of an option traveling this way. As long as you just are semi-conscientious about not doing major splurges like we just did to the Galapagos. That one was a major budget blower. But otherwise, it really doesn't cost that much at all. It's a pretty cheap way of seeing the world.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Nancy Sathre-Vogel, who's coming to us from familyonbikes.org. Nancy, thank you so much for coming on The Amateur Traveler.
Thank you for having me.
And I should say that we've been trying to do this for some time. I think we actually started talking before Nancy and the boys hit the road, but for a trip like this, I usually don't do an interview before the trip is in progress. So I contacted Nancy again after they got to Panama, but it took us a little while to get them on the show until they had a good internet connection. So Nancy, I'm glad we could have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally connected. It has been a long time, but yeah, it's good to talk to you.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I apologize again for the sound quality of that. If it makes you feel any better, I have to listen to the show 3 times before you hear it once, so I've had a chance to listen to that, and I thought at least was understandable enough, and I thought the story was good enough that I wanted to share it. In terms of internet resources, I have a review for you on the new Google phone, on the Nexus One, which just came out this week. I was fortunate enough to receive one from Google. Having a friend over at Google in a key position there helps out. And I'm planning on doing more gadget blogging, travel gadget blogging on the blog. So that would be blog.amateurtraveler.com right now. And so you can check out that review. And I'm planning on going tomorrow to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, in an effort to get more information like that. So check out the review. Peter from Chicago sent me an email talking about, I had mentioned that there was a cafe in Prague that was done in a French style and the waiters were a bit rude. I should point out that I actually didn't have a problem with the waiters, but our Czech tour guide thought they were particularly rude. But Peter wrote, your comment about the waiters either ignoring you or being rude in Prague reminded me of ads for the LOT, the Polish national airline, that I saw on the CTA a few years ago. Imagine a close-up picture of a frothy cafe au lait, and below it there's this caption, delightful Parisian cafes without the Parisians. It made me laugh. And then Lana was trying to sign up for the email newsletter, but didn't know how to do it. At the Amateur Traveler site, in the upper right-hand corner of the site, there are 4 icons, and the 4 icons are how you can subscribe to the show in various means. And so one is the RSS orange icon, and one is the iTunes icon, and then the third icon is a letter, and that's how you sign up for the email newsletter, and the fourth icon is a T, and that's how you sign up for Amateur Traveler on Twitter. And all 4 of those are beneath a banner that says subscribe for free. So check out the subscribe for free at amateurtraveler.com to get notification when something new is going on for the show. And then speaking of travel shows, I don't know that I've mentioned that the Amateur Traveler is now part of the Travelcast Network, and you can check out other shows in the Travelcast Network at travelcastnetwork.com, and that's actually a network that I'm running along with Todd Cochran from Raw Voice. So check out the other shows on that network as well. And with that, we're going to bring this show to a close so that I can go pack for CES. Feel free to subscribe at amateurtraveler.com. As we said, you can leave a comment on this episode also at the same website, or you can send me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. Don't forget to check out the iPhone app if you have an iPhone, and if you want a fancy phone and don't have an iPhone, check out the review that I mentioned of the Google Nexus One. As always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.